Mayor, Council. We'll now go through the budget packet. We'll go through department by department. You'll also see internal service and enterprise funds. And we'll have open discussion on which each department, what they're trying to accomplish, where we're going, and what it looks like. So if you can turn to your packet number, page 46 of your packet. So the first page that we'll look at is the fiscal year 2019 full-time / part-time position request. So just kind of going through what was actually requested versus what's within your packet today. So economic development, one position was requested for administrative analyst / development specialist. That is still currently within the budget itself. Police support department, Department 2100, requested one sergeant, one officer, and a part-time clerk. None of those positions are currently within the proposed budget.
Who's requesting these?
These are all requested by department heads.
Okay, department heads. Okay.
So going on to the next department, police field operations. They requested at the time of the beginning of the budget process, one sergeant and 7 officers. Currently within the budget right now, you have 2 officers. Department 2300, administrative services. Our police administration, you have administrative assistant. That currently still was within the budget itself. Fire administration, you have a part-time department secretary. That currently still is in the proposed budget. Fire operations, two increased firefighters. That is not within the proposed budget. Building inspections, you a request of a code enforcement officer. That is still within the current proposed budget. Public Works Department, parks, 3 has been requested for the general fund. That is currently within the proposed budget. Public Works Streets, 1 was requested. Internal Service Fleet, which is a maintenance individual, we requested 1 each. Those are not currently within the proposed budget. Is there any questions about this?
Are the Public Works parks, are those the additional employees funded by the FCRTA?
No.
Where are those additional employees?
They are part of the enterprise funds. You'll see those. They're not increases. They are currently in our FTEs right now, so they're not new. We're not adding to those positions. What they currently have as far as the contract is what it is.
So when that budget rolls over, does the labor contract roll over with Fresno County Rural Transit Authority?
Correct. It has a CPI built into
fund
it, so it's a 3-year term. It's a 5-year contract, but it has a negotiation factor at the year 3.
How many additional employees are coming over as a result of the FCRTA?
I want to say a total of 6.
6. Okay. And that budget, they wouldn't show up as actual employees of the city?
They would, but they're not increases the overall number count that we currently have. So, I mean, yes, you can propose that they're suggested, but they're not recommended. They are part of the contract, so they're staying within the contract that we have now.
Okay.
So if they were requesting an additional, we'd probably be stating that here.
Because I apologize. The 2, it looks like there were 2 positions already funded. It just looked like they're already there, and you're just continuing forward. Police admin and then fire admin. It looked like there were 2 employees there, and you go, well, they're already in the budget. We're just continuing that. We already planned to put them in. You mean they're not in there right now, but you plan to put them in this year's budget? Is
That's
that what
correct.
You meant?
So
Okay.
the first column itself is the actual request from the departments themselves during the budget process.
New employees for
New
the
employees.
1920 fiscal year.
Going into the 1920 fiscal year, correct.
Okay.
So your first column is request from the beginning of the budget process. The second column is what's currently being proposed in the budget that you're now going to review.
And who came up with who's doing the recommending?
We are, as the budget committee, finance, and myself.
Okay, and that would be
And we-
Isaac and that would be the assistant city manager and the city manager.
And we have met with each department to review their requests and talked about them. So, I mean, there has been a very collaborative discussions here on this as far as what are the priorities, and each department can share with you the reasons for their requests as they have with us. And then looking at the resources we have, we made a recommendation based on the priorities you've shared with us and the resources we have, and tried to match that in our preliminary first draft. So that's how we did that. We did meet with each department to go over their requests, and then we looked at what we can do. And one thing I did want to share, as Isaac mentioned, this is new positions, so this is adding full-time employees. In the Public Works Parks, it looks like, 3, but I want to share with you right now, there are 2 temporary employees that have been working there full-time that we are hoping this would be bringing them on as full-time. So they are all, 2 of those 3 positions in parks are already in the past budget, the one we're in now, 18-19, as temporary employees. So that would be a retention effort, and it's not really an increase in the budget, but except for the benefits, obviously.
They would then be full-time city employees who would be on the PEPRA retirement plan.
That's correct.
They'd be coming in on that plan, okay.
Is there any further questions regarding that part of the budget?
I have a question, just for Shane. What's the difference between a maintenance worker streets and a maintenance worker fleet? One just works on cars and.
Fleet's basically the mechanic takes care of all our fleet, our vehicles, our equipment. Streets is gonna be somebody that's out in the streets, maintaining sidewalks, streets, street lights, signage, things like that.
Okay.
It really based around what their job description is what these categories have to do and what they entail. So,
Right.
for example, a standard maintenance individual would be what a bulk of his staff is, whereas a mechanic, obviously a mechanic would be actually doing repairs and maintenance, things of that
So,
nature.
maintenance worker streets is the guy who goes around filling the potholes.
Amongst other things, yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. Chief Pedersen, you've requested 2 additional firefighters, and the recommendation is 0. Can I ask why?
Well, I can just share with you, when we went through the discussions about the priorities with the fire chief, they are currently at full staffing, while they would like to eventually get to a point where they could have go to a 4-man vehicle. Is that correct?
It would allow us to go to a 6-person minimum staffing on each shift, allowing 3 individuals on each fire engine.
But you've always been downstaffed, right? I mean, you've just now fully are staffed just recently.
It's probably 2 months ago.
Yeah.
We filled out our last previously budgeted position. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So are we, this is my first time, I'm sure Trujillo's too, but can we make recommendations, or are we not allowed to make a recommendation? Because I would like to see, I don't want to see what happened in the police department. So, because he's just, at this time, I would say 2 months ago, has been fully staffed. But he's been understaffed for, I would say, years, because the past 3 years that I've been coming to council meetings, from what I recall, fire department has never been fully staffed. So if I could see maybe adding an additional firefighter, so that brings him at least to 1, so he's not, we don't get to that point. If we do lose someone, we're making up again. We have someone there, and then continue to grow from there.
I hear what you're saying, and we definitely do want to have folks in the process so that if somebody leaves, I think that's what you're saying, if somebody leaves, we have the ability to quickly get back up to full staff.
Right.
Is that, am I capturing that right?
Basically, because we just don't want to fall
Behind.
short like we did with the police department. We
Absolutely.
continue to fall short, when we could have, hopefully at that one time, when we requested 2 more police officers, and we didn't get them, we probably wouldn't have had this problem that we have.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about, so right now we're fully staffed. We have the full-time positions, a full complement, if you will, for the 2 firehouses. And we are meeting our current minimum staffing level policies. If we were to lose a firefighter due to another opportunity somewhere or retirement, how quickly can we fill in, and what kind of resources do we have to keep that pipeline open? And that might be Chief and HR.
Yes, we do have an existing list right now. When we tested for entry-level firefighter positions, I believe it was back in June of last year. And we do have an existing list and that list is good up to a year, and then I believe we can extend it for another year. We probably have 3 or 4 individuals that are still left on that list that if we needed to, we could pull from.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Isaac, going back to this budget here, these proposals here, these recommendations from the department head and then the actual numbers on the bottom means that these are actually funded, already budgeted in our budget?
They are in the proposed budget,
They are
that's correct.
in the proposed budget. In the past 2 to 3 years, have they been budgeted before?
Some of these positions have been budgeted. For example, the administrative analysis for economic development, although the structure of it is, we see a little more different coming into the
Mhm.
budget year.
Mhm.
There has been that position filled in the past.
Okay. And in regards to that, understanding that, understanding budgets, my question is that when you meet with the department heads, they give you their wants and their needs and the reasons why. But we also know that we have these positions that we have budgeted. And this is a proposed budget. So once we hear this, you'll go back to your department heads and talk in regards to what are the actual needs and where we're gonna be heading for the following year? Is that what you guys doing? Are you guys meeting with your department heads? He just stated that, we have a pool of people and we're funded till the end of the year. But are we doing analysis on maybe a 2 to 3 year plan where our growth gonna, our police department's gonna have a new police department, we'll be able to bring in 2 more officers, plus the 5 we hired, that's 7. Will we be needing 2 more in the near future? Are you looking at that?
We have not done an analysis as far as FTEs and what that looks like for the future and what we try to accomplish. Again, it goes back to what our visioning program that we look like. I mean, that's a moving target overall each year, although the overall objective stays the same. I mean, we really want to come back and have that conversation all the time and say, okay, where are we at? What are we looking at? Where are our needs and what do we need to assess now? Do we have more development? Therefore, we need to increase our number of cops. So we don't really want to say, well, now we got 250 homes over there. We need to bulk it up because we need a new patrol thing. I mean, we really have to take it as you go through the budget years and
Okay.
cycles.
And you stated that these are actually already proposed budgeted
These are
positions, the ones that you guys have down.
the items and the numbers that are on the right-hand column are currently in the proposed budget.
Good.
So we can go through that process and talk about what these positions look like and what we're trying to accomplish, and what each department head again is trying to accomplish.
Isaac, just perhaps maybe the police chief can answer this. So if we budget more officers, which I think we're all in favor of, do they need new cars, or we have additional cars to give them, or do we have to budget those cars as well?
That's correct. You do have to assess fleet when it comes to PD and what that number looks like, what they currently have, the age of their fleet, and trying to get that turn. Within the budgeting process, you can see they requested a number of individuals. They're requesting also an additional vehicle for each one of those vehicles. So given that, you have, depending on how many individuals come in, what that program looks like and reassessing that as a whole.
If I might just add
go
to that, we did have a request we did discuss with the 2 new officers we're recommending bringing on. We recommended bringing on 1 new vehicle and looking at if we need to having a vehicle shared between shifts.
But that would be on a separate budget item, right? Because it's a vehicle and you'd be able to.
Vehicles, it's be part of this
That'd be
process. For
fine.
example, again, if we start looking at adding additional officers and shifting and moving this budget around, you got to understand what the ramifications are. You now have more equipment that you got to purchase. You have to assess our fleet needs. So adding a position is one thing, but assessing what that position needs is that secondary tier, so it has a ramification of the overall budget.
Going back to this other, in the past, you showed us some policy making. Is that what you were speaking in regards to our future policies or our policies with some earmarked money in regards to purchasing vehicles, in
That's
regards
correct.
to for the long term?
It goes
for 5
back to what
10
our
years?
equipment replacement program is now.
Cool.
our program that we currently have now is really as is and as needed, not really looking towards the future. Again, my
Will you be
objective is
bringing
really
that?
to look to the future and say, okay, if Public Works loses their bucket truck or whatever that truck is, we didn't foresee it to go down, but we can now look to that fund to accomplish that need that needs to be to happen.
And that is what you were requesting for us to start talking about policy making for the fiscal 5 to 10
That's
year.
correct.
Good.
So although we'll attempt to pit or we'll request in the budget process vehicles to try and accommodate where our growth is, if you don't look long term and look at these vehicles, then you're really going to come into a vehicle or a situation just like we have for fire, where their ladder truck is in now in need, and we have to try and assess that. So we don't want to pit ourselves in that position 10 years from now.
So are you thinking that after we're done with this budget, we'll start talking about policy making?
But-
Or talking in regards to,
That is the objective, yes.
good, okay.
So again, this is really just to try and assess because these do have impacts to your overall budget, whether it's a vehicle replacement program or a CIP, a capital improvement program. They all have ramifications to the current budget process. So we'll start talking about that and what that looks like. It doesn't mean we have to adopt them tomorrow. It doesn't mean they have to go into this budget, but we just need to start having those conversations. And what does that look like? For example, development impacts. What does that look like? How does that affect your overall budget? So looking at the whole and understanding that any decision or policy that is made by this body does impact your budget as a overall. Okay? So
you're
planning
looking
for
for
the future.
direction from us today as to the overall numbers, the recommended numbers. You're listening as we come up with the numbers for that, and as we go through the budget impacts, looking at those various
Correct.
budget items.
So we're
right?
looking at the budget as a body. What is your suggestions? How do you see this? We went through our visioning session and we kind of grasped what we thought we were looking for. Again, there's no crystal ball, but we wanted to be able to ask those questions. This is what we thought we heard, right or wrong. Where do you see us going, and how do you want to adjust and
Are
move
you
forward?
looking for percentages from us today too, for overall?
No
planning?
fiscal policy would be adopted today overall. If that's
But you're looking for input from us.
That's
in terms
you
of
can
what-
provide input as far as the fiscal policies. Again, we'll have that in another meeting and a standard meeting
Mhm.
because it is a policy and needs to be adopted. You have to go through those motions. But these are just some of the things that I'd like you to keep in the back of your mind and what we're looking towards for the future.
Yeah, I think at this point, we want to go through the budget with you, see where you might have questions, see where you think, have we addressed your concerns, and priorities.
Teresa, one last question on the positions. What if I see something here? I know we talked about our planning department getting a planning director or something. I don't see that listed on. Is that budgeted? Or
That's already
Yeah,
in
the
there.
planning manager position is budgeted. Council took action to approve that position in this current fiscal year,
Mhm.
so that is now part of
Okay.
our,
All right.
Yeah,
overall.
That's already accounted for.
as well
Yeah,
as
thank you.
the
That's-
planning
that's it for me.
consultants that and the
contract.
items that have already been approved for the housing element consultant as well.
Can I ask a question real quick? Economic Development Director, once this budget is approved, will you start looking to replace or get an Economic Development Director?
We don't actually have an economic development director position recommended in here. We do have an economic development administrative analyst or development specialist, which would be more of a administrative analyst position. So it wouldn't be a director, but it would help address council's obviously tons of votes for economic development. So we think that would address the
How would you measure the productivity on that position? Because the city used to have somebody that did that, and it didn't really work out. There weren't a lot of, I think that person was signed to grant writing and just too many things. It was a really vague position. Didn't seem like it was really well defined. Is this a pretty tightly defined position? I mean, is there going to be a way to measure productivity on this? Kind of unlike the previous one.
Well, I think we can put into place items for that accountability that you're looking for. We could have regular reporting on the leads and the businesses that are worked with. We have talked about having it be a position that is a little bit nimble. So if we need to also do some things that are community development oriented or demographics, there is some
Would this
flexibility.
person try to recruit business for Selma? Would this person be reaching out? Because the chamber says they don't reach out. They take care of the businesses that are here that join their organization, but they don't reach out and try to get us new business. we belong to the EDC as a city, and that's a great organization to be part of. But in terms of specifics, would this person be tasked with reaching out and finding more businesses, looking at trends, studying what Selma is all about, and selling Selma to the outside, to other businesses and other communities?
Yeah, I think we would be looking for them to do that data mining and to help with that outreach, recruitment, retention, expansion are the key points of economic development, and that would be key. So that person can be the liaison to the EDC, to ICSC, help spearhead all of our efforts with that, and keep tracking for us, that matrix of who we've been working with and follow-ups.
We're talking about, suggestions today, right? We're giving suggestions.
Right.
So, I mean, it seems like the city has a lot a lot of prospects, a lot of businesses. There's subdivisions, gosh, 2 home subdivisions, and then one commercial project that's just kind of waiting. And we don't have, it seems like, rather than try to go out and get new business, we got the business. We just need to execute what we have first
Yeah.
and bring that in. And we don't seem to have that infrastructure right now, as it were, in the building and planning department to, make it user-friendly for people to come in,
Yep.
do plan check, get permits, get through that process. It seems like we don't have the internal workings to do that. So I'm all for, funding that to get people in. As an order of operation, absolutely we need to look outwards and get more business and always be selling Selma and, having people do Diorigo type studies for us. But, I mean, I think we need to shore up what we have right now.
Yeah.
We need to make ourselves more business friendly, more efficient. I think that planner's really going to help get someone mentioned on council, Lewis, get our codes looked at, ordinances, revamp that, just make us more professional, make us more business friendly. So when I see that economic development, I say, great, but I just don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if we have enough internal workings at this point to bring in the business that wants to come in and is kind of unable to because we don't have the resources to bring them in. How are we addressing that?
Right. There are a couple of key positions that we are looking at filling, the planning manager being one of them for that planning process that we need to have that stability in. The economic development specialist analyst that we're talking about would be able to be more of that liaison through the process of sometimes going from the planning to the business, or somebody who's already in existence and they need some troubleshooting, also working with our partners.
So they would be liaising with the developers as well, the business people out there, the businesses that want to come in. They'd be kind of our marketing arm as well.
They can definitely do that. So I think it's, a multifaceted position. I think I think we're in a place where we need to be looking for the talent and the person that has the ability to go across a variety of areas. They're not just pigeonholed into, I do the demographics and that's all I do. They need to be able to assist in a number of areas. And that's why I like that development specialist kind of title, because it gives you that breadth. So if right now your focus is on outreach, then we can hone it in there. If your focus is on improving our incentives, we can have them, really assess an incentive package and start working on incentive tools. If the focus is on improving our codes, they can, under the direction, of myself, Isaac, or the planning manager, look at codes we need to update so we could have mixed use downtown, or they could look at helping with the revitalization of downtown and coordinate between engineering and public works on lighting and sound, and kind of help be that liaison with all those things that we're all trying to do right now.
So kind of the face
Strike
of the
while the
city.
iron's hot.
What you're stating is because of our economic environment, this specialist person would be working in regards to kind of jack of all trades in our city hall. But I think what the mayor was stating, I love the fact that he was stating this, that we have 3 potential people that right now want to move the envelope,
Mhm.
that are really wanting. If we hired this person and you are, could we make it a point as a council or direction for staff that, you know, let's put these 3 as priority and say, you know what, let's adhere to this, let's get this done, let's move this, let's move these. These are 3, let's
Well,
streamline
we
them.
want to
These 3
streamline,
Yeah.
you
These
know,
three-
Fast
we
track
want
it.
it to be
if we
simple,
want,
simplify it.
yeah, if we get this individual, let's
Yeah.
make sure that they baby step these 3
Bring them all the way
That's
through.
right,
and let's get it done. I mean, that's,
that's right.
and that's a good starting point for her, for him,
Mhm.
to get to,
Could-
you know, and now they understand the,
To learn the process.
Yeah.
You know,
Which is
how
my
it
point.
works so that they can explain it to others. And then we could get that spreadsheet that Councilperson Garrett talked about, then we could kind of see the timeline of where it is
Mhm.
and where they're coming, you know, and how that project is coming along.
Yeah.
So that when they invariably call us to see what's going on, we have an answer.
Mhm.
Okay.
you.
And any further questions on that page? Nope. All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next page, which is a summary page of our overall budget for the general fund. You can kind of see a little bit of analysis here and look at your trends for the actual of 17-18. You can see the adopted budget for 18-19 and the requested for 19-20. So you are seeing a large increase in your overall budget from going from a 3.8 to a 6.1. And we'll kind of assess what those numbers look like going into each department and why you're seeing those jumps. 13, yeah, sorry. So you're going from a 13.8 to a 16.1 overall budget. So if you
So
want to go,
adopted that means the actual numbers.
that's your actual budget for 18-19. So again, we're looking at more of an analysis, giving you the information is what I'm trying to provide, so you can see where we're going, what we're looking at, not just as far as the bottom line for each department. So as you add those individuals, as you change those services you're providing, there's ramifications to the department as a whole. So you can kind of see the budget shift and move as we grow as a city. So we'll go on to the next budget, or to the next page, I should say. Department 0000 is where your property taxes and your franchise fees and sales taxes actually are occurring. So you can see within the budgeted year of 18-19, we have a budget amount of 5.4 for your projected sales tax. But coming into the requested year of 19-20, you're seeing a jump of 6.6, which is an increase of 21%. Now, looking at your budget number, we're actually filling that gain this fiscal year. We're looking at a projection of 6.1 to 6.2 in sales tax revenue at the end of the fiscal year for 18-19. The similar thing happened in the prior budget year as well. We started seeing our analysis that was given to us from Menu Services when we got the report was stating a particular number, and then we got the numbers going into the future years, and we started seeing the gain and increases overall. So given that assessment, that's the budgeted number. So it's an optimistic number. They actually give you a most likely an optimistic number. It's really, we're using the middle line there. We're not using an overinflated number that is projected. It could be projected. We're using a middle row, more of an optimistic number that looks towards the borderline of their sales tax. So again, looking at our numbers, you're getting an overall trend analysis of what do we see our property taxes and things that growing over the years. So that's how we come up to these numbers.
So you're saying that 6.6 is overly optimistic?
6.6 is actually just it's the likely. It's our likely. So
So they give you a range.
they
and
give you
go with
three
an-
ranges. They give you a low, a medium, and an optimistic number.
And
so
you go with the medium.
I go with the medium, and we've been doing that on average for the last couple of years.
Okay.
Okay. So given that, your overall revenues for that department are gaining about 17% or $2 million within this column itself. So within this item itself, you're going to see the operating transfers in. This is where you're seeing the ambulance transfer. You're seeing revenue streams from other departments, or not other departments, other funds coming into the general fund. That's how this mechanism works. So we'll get into what that breakdown looks like. So this 1.6, I'll actually go into the budget later and kind of give you an assessment of what's built into that number itself. So a part of it is the ambulance fund. A part of it is the revenue stream coming from the transit. Different components that are built into that number. So we'll assess that at a later page within this budget report.
That makes up the operating transfers in,
That's correct.
the ambulance fund, and what else?
Well, not to jump ahead, but if you turn to your packet in page 90, you'll see what that number consists of. So you'll see an ambulance transfer of 1.4. You see a transfer from the transit at 200,000, public safety fund 204, and traffic safety for 142 and 145,000. That makes up that 1.6.
So it's the ambulance, the transit, public safety, and traffic safety funds that makes that up. That's what ties in to this budget amount, this budget
Correct.
page.
You also see a transfer in
Overall.
for Measure S for that supplement, but we'll see that on another page, and we can go through that and what that looks like. So it's directly allocated to each department. Okay. Any further questions regarding this department?
Why did the franchise fees for Cal Water go down? Why do you think they're gonna go down?
Again, just looking at where our numbers are falling now, just looking at that trend. And
'Cause
so
they're
I brought
taking an
some numbers
increase.
come up, some come down. For example, your garbage will go slightly up because of the CPI. It does affect our overall franchise
But they're-
fees.
I'm sorry,
Um,
but just common sense. They're taking an increase, so the franchise fees would go up, right?
Yeah.
Unless people are gonna use less water and our population's gonna go down.
Yeah, so
Maybe
again,
that's
looking
what
at
they're
the
looking
trends
at.
of what we look like, they are giving a small increase overall. I want to say it's 8 cents, some to that extent, so the ramifications. But what I'm looking at is the numbers that we're actually receiving this year and saying, okay, what does that mean going into the future? And what did I get to the prior years and kind of coming up on an overall average of what that number looks like. And so that's how I do an assessment of what our franchise fees look like. So again, thinking of what the garbage is, you have your set structure as far as maybe your residential, but what is commercial doing? So your commercial is a good big component of your franchise fees. You have to assess that too. So it's not a flat dollar amount each year that you're going to be seeing. You really have to see the trends of what's going on in the community, what's going on currently in your budget year, and make that assessment overall. That falls true for all these items, as well as the TOT.
And for our new council members, can you explain the TOT?
The transit occupancy tax. So all the hotels that we currently have a 12% tax on them as for individuals that are staying within those hotel rooms. One component of the 6% is what they call Measure K. It is geared towards recreational department services, and we'll get into that too as well. You'll see that on your transfer form and how that's divvied up and allocated out to different funds. Okay. So as our residents of hotels come in, our TOT is generating more and more dollars. Yes, we thank the city attorney for staying.
Just as a quick side note, so I went to a conference earlier this year at the Ahwahnee, Mariposa County. The representative for Mariposa County on the Board of Supervisors addressed the board and said their TOT from Yosemite is $8 million. Is that incredible? Ours is budgeted 430,000 just from the Yosemite tourism. Wow. Incredible. That was to the point of nothing. Just brought that up. It's amazing.
And just so you understand the rate structure, I mean, I did do an analysis of what our tax looks like. It is a tax. It has to be adopted and approved, and I think it actually has to go through an election. But we're kind of middle ground of where everybody is at. I mean, you're looking at some people in 9s. Most people are at 12s, though.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we'll move on to the next department, which is City Council. Some of these departments, similar to this one, will stay pretty flat. You'll see your health insurance, depending on who's taking insurance, who doesn't, and kind of giving some fluctuation between that because it is a great expense. So you understand going into this budget process, we budget about $18,240 for each individual just for health insurance itself. That's kind of a blended rate again. So when it comes to our health insurance, you look at what are currently paying because you know what the first 6 months are going to be because our policies changed as of January. So you take an assessment of what you have for the first 6 months and then forecast for the next 6 months and come up with that blended rate overall. Okay? And it's the same practice we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Council, do we want to keep the 10,000 for the year? For conferences, each of us has about 2,000, 2,500 to go to conferences, do educational things. Is that a good number? Do we want to keep it at that?
I just think that, I mean, as the mayor, I think that, there are times where you'll be going places that's gonna exceed it, and I think that You know, I
Mhm.
think the mayor should have a little more discretion. I think the mayor pro tem.
I think we got, this is really meant for enhancing our skills to better serve the city.
Yeah.
I think you need to.
Conferences, not to do that, it's just. My apologies. As I was saying, this is like we go to a conference to learn about new laws and stuff, so we can help better govern the city. Or city conferences would apply to that, but there's also times when we go to conferences or meetings to do our work and to like
Yeah.
Las Vegas. That's really to promote the city, to bring in business. It's not really to development for ourselves, you know. Or when you had to go meet the governor,
Yeah.
that really wasn't development. That was
Right.
just a meeting to represent the city and do your your duties as the mayor. So I think, like you said, there's times when we'll have to go, but I think this should just be charged for career development or
Development only.
education. I guess is a better word.
So you're saying there's a separate fund then, if it comes to where they have to send?
Well, there was never no fund. We just went in the past, but I found.
Well, me as an individual council member, feel that there are times where the mayor and the mayor pro tem will be going to having to represent the city into some meetings, and that money and that expense is actually being pulled into this expense. And I think that we as a whole, when we're talking about advancing our city and becoming economic, stimulating our city, it's gonna take an investment. And we have to understand that. So I'm not saying, oh, let's make it $100,000. I'm just saying that there are some meetings and some items that are gonna have, where it's gonna exceed this, or if not for one individual person. I would hate to hear that our mayor's not gonna go attending because they attended the last two. And I don't think that should be done. I think we as a council should be discussing that, because it shortens our ability to streamline what we wanna do.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
My opinion.
We got a comment?
Who's the two going this year? Did the administration reach out to you guys possibly 8 months ago, that they had meetings for you guys out there already intact because you two were going? I know we've attended city council years ago, and no one ever told us in administration, not one person, that we were supposed to have meetings. We should have just basically booked some shows. You're supposed to have meetings intact, whether you're going to attend or not. You might be new. You shouldn't be asking, what are we supposed to do? Administration should be reaching out to you exactly in months and months in advance and tell you, hey, listen, we got meetings for you guys with Target. We got meetings with you guys with whoever it is, and have at least 10 meetings intact for those days. Now, if administration, and they know better, they know they're supposed to do that, whether you're going to attend or not. They could always cancel them later. But if they haven't had any meetings with anything ready for you guys in line to attend Las Vegas, I don't even know why you guys are going. So has anybody reached out to you in administration and told you guys have meetings in line? They have?
So going back, I mean.
Okay, then that's good. But I'm just saying, you guys should know how that works. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, going back to the issue in regards to the budget of $10,000, I'm just stating that in regards to us as a city, as we speak into this budget in regards to bettering and getting the future of our stability and the economic growth of our community, I think it's best that we would keep this in line, but at the same time understand that when you're attending a meeting because somebody's requested you to go, that shouldn't count, because there's.
So to kind of answer your question, there's no set policy for this
Okay,
dollar amount.
that's all I
There's
wanted
not.
to know, you know?
There's not everyone gets this, and that. It's really meant to as a training mechanism. Obviously, as you're aware, things occur, and we need to dip into it for another reason, because the mayor gets called to a meeting that he has to go to, things of that nature. Somebody has a special board meeting that they have to go to. So it was intended in the original as a training mechanism, but obviously it can get gobbled up for some other unforeseen circumstance.
Yeah.
So everybody should have the opportunity to go, better themselves educationally, to do their job better. The issue with this, just because you, for your education, this came about was I know when I went to the new mayor's conference, I paid for everything. I paid my hotel. There was no budget for it, and the times were a little leaner financially, and I felt that was my duty. Then we had someone go next year with a different city manager, and they just paid all their expenses for him because it became a favoritism thing. And so I didn't have a problem with that. It was just, can we have a policy? So I think that's why we clarified. I don't know if the number is important as all the city council members having an equal shot at going and bettering their education and having, a budget amount worked in, whether that's 10 or 15,000. And I'm aware of other cities where people, they will take more of the budget because they might be more inside, in terms of political knowledge and background. I think everybody should, have that opportunity to go, and I'm aware of that, and I want to be observant and respectful of that amount, and that's why. And I've been to Vegas a couple times, so I know that it's important for us to be able to go to that. I've gone to a couple conferences this year, and I think they've been very, the first conference on CalPERS and accounting and actuarial science was definitely important for the city, and then the second one with the governor was very important. And I think I would have liked to have gone back to Washington, for the Council of Governments. That would have been a good one, but I felt like I exceeded my budget amount. I was there, and I didn't want to, take more than was allotted to me. So, I think in the future, maybe if someone has something as a council member that they want to do, maybe just bring it up to the council and say, hey, I've exceeded my budget, what does the council think about going in this? And then it's a collaborative decision rather than someone just, hogging the whole budget amount or, just doing what they want with the travel conference and meeting. I think that's the whole purpose of a budget. And I'm, as you've heard, I'm not grandstanding here. I'm sticking to a budget. I think that's very important, and that's why we have that budget amount in the first place. And if we want to change that, great. But as long as we're all, in agreement, or the majority's in agreement on this, and I think we are. Educational is good, and there should be a budgeted amount for that. If emergencies come up, they come up. So is there agreement just to keep this at 10,000 for now?
Yeah, we'll keep it at 10,000, and then we can relook at it in case down the road, Scott, we can actually, and a lot of times, if there's an emergency, like if it needs something, hey, if that's the case, I'm willing to step away and say, hey, man, I get my allotment to the mayor, or more in case of an emergency, hey, I can say, hey, guys, I'm allotted this much money. Say, hey, why don't you give to these two guys, make sure they're there.
Yeah, make it a discussion.
Make a discussion issue, you know what I mean? An important decision, you know what I mean? As a group,
Makes sense.
okay?
One other item I would like to point out in this department is professional services. You're seeing it go up from 100 to 45,000. So what that amount really consists of is the redistricting, professional services that we're going to be start assessing, and some annual goals of priority and team building going into the next fiscal year, for next fiscal. So you are seeing a jump within this department, but that's the parameters in which you're seeing it for. Okay?
Okay.
So if there's no other further questions, we'll move on to the next department. So the next department is 1,200 city attorney. So our current fiscal budget year of 18-19, you're seeing at 120,000. You are seeing an increase within this department of 180. Now, this increase is really due to the assessment, again, of some of the requests of council to really look at some of our codes and things of that nature. Although it's really expensive, and I think Bianca's pointed this out in the past, to really go through and do a deep dive, but maybe we can actually do some of this, do assessing of what does that verbiage look like for a couple of our codes, and going through that process. Again, it's not going to really change the overall and going through a full assessment and scraping it, but it really will give us a little bit of leeway to be able to, if we want to look at something, have a look. Right.
Will this include looking at our impact and development fees as well? Okay.
Again, it can go to the council's direction on
important,
what
right.
we want to look at. Do we want to
Some
look at
developers see.
administrative citations? What does that look like, and why is it all over the place? Or I mean, again, it's not really identified. It's really just saying, okay, if there's something that's going on and we feel we need to assess that, or you feel you need to assess that as a group, we can give the city attorney direction to be able to do that. So
So what I'm hearing is city attorney doesn't charge 50% more than the previous city attorney did. This is for special projects
correct.
that they're
Correct.
being
So, I
tasked
mean,
with.
we really haven't, obviously, they haven't been on for a full year. What I can say is looking at the bills that you'll see in the next warrants list, they were averaging around 9 to 10 a month.
Are we caught up on those bills, Mr. City Attorney?
No, we should be upon Bianca's return next week. We should get caught up by middle of May at the latest.
Okay, we'll be up to date.
Yep. But I think the most recent two bills, I believe that those were January, February, if I'm not mistaken.
In November, December.
In
I think.
November, December, I'm
November,
sorry.
December.
And those were at the combined total was 16,000,
Or so.
just under $17,000 combined
For 2 months.
for 2 months, sir.
Thank you.
And again, you'll see that on your next warrants report, I believe. So, okay. So there's no other further questions. We'll move on to the next department. So Department 1300 is your city manager's department. You're not going to see a lot of change within this overall. Obviously, we do have a full-time city manager sitting in the seat, so that does change the overall impact of the budget. Where in the past you're budgeting for a partial, you're budgeting for professional services because you had an interim come in for a little while. So that's the overall impacts and changes you'll see within the department, but everything else is, for the most part, status quo. Is there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward to human resources. So human resources department, again, you are seeing an increase overall, some of the impacts being professional services. So going through what's currently going on in our human resource and HR department, we're actually looking to assess some of those things. Some of the stuff we wanted to really look at, I believe, was our employee manual. So that's kind of built in some of the professional service right now, so we can accomplish some of those procedures and get that done. It does take a lot of staff time trying to accomplish. Again, looking at this department, it is only one individual, so saying that they can accomplish all these tasks over the period of years, you really need to give them assistance and professional service to try and accomplish some of those things that we need to look at.
Is Tesla going to do the employee manual herself, or is she going to have someone to assist her with that? The city attorney. That's what you mean by legal?
Lieber
Oh,
Cassidy.
Lieber, the HR attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that where the economic development, is that where the administrative analyst in HR, is that where they would be budgeted? Or
No,
would
they're
that
in
be
they're in
finance?
their own department of 1550. It's the next page.
Okay.
So if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next department. So next department, as I just stated, is 1550 Economic Development. This is where you'll see the individual that's being requested as far as, make sure I get the title right, Administrative Analyst Class Development Specialist is where you'll see that individual.
This is a new page. We
This
didn't
is
have this last year.
this is a proposed new position.
Okay.
So as you can see from the budget of 1819, you're pretty much zeroed out. It was all shifted into the finance department for the budget of last year. So you are seeing some professional services. You'll see a component of Townsend. You'll see a component of, we're looking to see if we can contract with the EDC to get that individual some assistance. So that's built into this budget right now. You also see some memberships like Kings Basin, Cal-Ed, the Fruit Trail, things of that nature.
So the
these-
1718 was when the city had the previous individual that worked in that
That's
position?
correct.
Okay.
Is there any questions regarding this department?
In the previous year, was it just a part-time?
For
position?
17, 18,
Mm-hmm.
it was a partial year.
Oh, partial.
That individual wasn't, because these are 17, 18 is actual, so
Okay.
that individual wasn't here for the full
Okay.
year. Okay. Moving forward. Move into the finance department. A lot of this is pretty much status quo overall. We do have within this department myself and also my accountant Heather that's being allocated 25% each, and it's get bills to the assessor agency. So as a component, professional services, pretty much standard. You're looking at the audit, which costs about $65,000 for itself. CalPERS reports, our municipal advisor NHA for some of our bonding filings, shredding, Chamber of Commerce. The one item that I do want to point out that's a big component of this is actually looking at performing a user fee study. So what this does is look at our current user fees that we're providing or allocating. Was, for example, what are we charging in building to do an assessment or do an inspection? What are we charging in planning to do an economic environment review? These items they're dated. They really need to be assessed to not only look at what we're charging to get them current, but really to make sure if we're in compliance and we're charging the appropriate dollar amounts. So this is not just a finance mechanism, it's a all department mechanism to make sure everybody's charging accordingly to state law, make sure they're charging, because remember, we're only supposed to be cost recovery. Although the finance department is taking the user fee schedule that we've had, I think it was done in 2005, and kind of built into it and move forward and reassess it each year. I mean, we tweaked it to make sure that it is what it's supposed to be. It's now time to reassess that as a whole. Are we losing money? Are we overcharging? What does that even look like? Are we charging for services that, are we doubling up in certain areas? Are we not charging something? I mean, it's really going to go through a deep dive and do that.
Are you going to assess each department ahead, each department itself, or you?
This goes through each department.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
good. So that planning director will actually be able to assess.
Correct. That's
Other
actually what's
than-
held me back, is waiting for that position to be filled so that
That's good.
I want to try and accomplish this fiscal, but I need somebody, or I should say we would need a full team to be able to get that accomplished.
Yeah.
So as the finance department, I can't say, well, the planning director does this, this, and this. I need the planning individual, the manager to say, well, yes, I do this and this and this, but it really only takes me this much time to do it. So it's a really deep dive into our user fees and how much time does it really take to an individual to do that? Who's touching it? Is the fire department touch it? Does the police department touch it? I mean, it really goes into a deep dive and really gets that current to where it needs to be and in compliance overall for state mandates and things of that nature of what you can be charging. Is there any questions regarding this department? Okay. We'll move forward. So our next page is the city clerk department. Again, kind of status quo overall. Some of her standard professional services are like the ordinance codifiers and things of that nature. When codes get changed, she has to update them and go through that process. Is there any questions regarding this department?
How many employees do we have in this? Just one, right?
We actually have two.
Two, that's right. There's
David
one
up front
from last year.
is within this department itself.
Gotcha.
No further questions. We'll go ahead and move forward. Police support. One thing I will point out ahead of time going into PD and to fire, sitting down with the department heads and really assessing what these revenue streams will look like, not just really forecasting, but it's saying, okay, who's performing those tasks and where should they go? So you will see some zeros in the current budget years, but what we're doing is taking some of those revenue streams and shifting them where they need to be. For example, the SRO contract with the school district. It's really the individuals that are performing those tasks are really part of the support division, not the operations division. So we're moving things around to accommodate for what's actually really truing things up. Again, going back to the requested and what's in the proposed budget, there is no new positions within this department. If there's any questions regarding the actions and things that you can point to Chief and can answer those questions.
Is that 191,000 per year for the SROs?
That's correct.
Okay.
What it is about they only work actually 10% or 10 months out of the year, so it's really an assessment of what their current labor costs are and billing out in that structure.
Has that contract been renewed? Are we in the middle of that contract, or is that the with the Selma Unified School District?
It would be, the school district, it will be, I should say, the school district has expressed a desire to continue it. Once we
What's the
finish-
usual term of that?
I'm sorry,
What's the usual term of that contract?
3 years.
3 years. Pretty much status quo, same amount.
You know, they were discussing the possibility of adding an additional SRO, but that hasn't come to fruition yet, so I suspect it'll be status quo.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this department? Okay, move forward. Next department is 2200, police field operations. This is where we're adding the 2 additional officers. You are seeing a growth within their overall expenditures of about 12%. Again, professional services go up. Some of the large contracts that are in there, training for the dogs, phlebotomists, things of that nature, just their overall professional services they need to perform tasks to keep for the city.
Operating transfers in. Here we are.
Operating transfers in, that is Measure S.
Measure S.
So what we did, and we started it last fiscal, it used to be a direct supplement into Department 0000. It is now allocated to Fire and PD because there is a overall percentage, 60-40 split. So it's really just identifying which department gets that supplement. And we'll get into Measure S and what that looks like.
So, but for this year, 736, 384 from Measure S is budgeted to go into the police department.
That's correct. So what you do as far as the formulation, the process I go through is I take what the forecasted revenue stream of sales tax is, carve out what's directly allocated in that fund and say, okay, what's left over of that 60-40 split of the whole gets allocated to that. And that's what the number that you're seeing there.
So you take 60% and allocate it to the PD and 40% allocated
Well, I
to
take
the
the
fire
60%
department.
of a whole, back out what's actually being utilized within the fund itself, and then allocate that difference.
You take the promised amounts that you've already had allocated, you take those out, and then the remainder of the net, you assign that ratio to.
That's correct.
Based on the size of the departments.
Not the size of the department, it's just a 60-40 split. So if sales tax is $100, we're already spending, a certain amount within there. That 60, it's still supposed to be $60 and to PD and $40 for safety. So in that, for example, $60, I back out the 10 that's already been utilized and allocate the remaining balance.
Was that per the measure, the 60-40 split?
That
Per
was
the
my
measure
understanding.
itself?
That's part of the measure. That's 60-40 split.
Okay.
Again, it's just an overall. It all goes into the general fund. It's more of just so you can see the information there. So before it just went into the transfers in. Okay. There's no other questions. We'll move forward. Police Administration, Department 2300. This is where you will see another new position overall. That's why you're seeing a gain at the bottom line of administrative assistant.
Is that for the department, the overall department?
I'm sorry?
Who's the administrative assistant for?
That's for the overall department.
For
Yeah.
what, for secretarial, those type of duties, admin assistant duties?
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that would be good to explain a bit about that request, because we had some discussion about it as well as, and one of the things that for me was a big factor is knowing that having that position is going to alleviate administrative work from a sergeant position, and that sergeant will be freed up to do more tactical work. Do you want to explain that a little bit more, Chief, please?
Certainly. Some of you may remember back when the recession hit, we lost quite a few people, including the department's administrative assistant. Many, in fact, all of the duties that position was tasked with back in the day fell on a sergeant, and has been handled by a sergeant ever since, which includes, the things you would normally associate with an administrative assistant: paying bills, processing paperwork, doing processing personnel forms like personal action forms, processing training payments. 90% of what that position does now is more administrative than tactical, and that position is currently held by a sergeant. Hiring this person will allow us to free that sergeant up to go back to supervising sworn personnel. That sergeant will soon be responsible for supervising our investigative unit, our school resource officers, our POP officer when we add that position, and that'll be their full-time job because those other duties will be assumed by the administrative assistant.
Does everybody know what a pop officer is?
No.
I'm sorry, it stands for problem-oriented. It's a detective spot. It stands for problem-oriented policing. That position will be tasked with the duty of surveying locations within the city that generate large numbers of calls for service and try to determine what the root cause of those calls for service are. Many times those root calls have nothing to do with criminal activity. It could just be a ill-placed payphone. When we had payphones, we don't have many of those anymore, but it's just really to determine the root cause of what the problem is and try to eliminate those calls for service by eliminating that root cause.
The two officers that the council is proposing to fund, though, would be on patrol, right? They'd be patrol officers?
They would be in that division, correct.
Would they be POP officers, or would they be
No,
actual patrol?
The POP officer is actually a position we're going to be able to create in this year's budget with our current staffing now that we're fully staffed. The two new additional bodies will be in the field operations division. So yes, they will be in patrol.
So this will authorize 2 more officers, this
Correct.
budget, and then 1 additional administrative assistant, and then the POP officer will come from within the
Correct.
existing
The
force.
existing staff.
Okay.
It was part of your proposed 18-19 budget, that position.
It's budgeted.
It's budgeted. I shouldn't say proposed, adopted. Any further questions? Okay. Moving into fire. So this is what a proposed part-time employee within this division that is new. One thing I will point out is that you are seeing a shift between the overall expenditures, actually a decrease. At one point, or for the fiscal year of 18-19, you had a division chief in here, which is where you're seeing the big swing. So that's no longer a position within the proposed budget. Chief, if you'd like to explain the new position.
Yes, so what we are you referring to?
The vice
The-
administrative.
The additional administrative assistants, what we're looking for within this department, will help us to, right now we do have 1 part-time administrative assistant, works 4 days a week, about 4 hours a day. And this will supplement, it will supplement that position. It will also allow us to, one of our objectives for this budget was to bring our FICE program. It's Firefighters in Safety Education. We've had that program now. It's a fire prevention program that we do within the schools. We reach approximately, depending on class size, 1,100 students each year, broken down between pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, 1st through 3rd, and 3rd through 5th grade. And we go in and provide fire safety education to those students. Previously, we've had to fund that program through donations. The healthcare district has helped us fund that program. I believe we're in our 5th year. What we would like to be able to do is, instead of having to rely upon donations, is to bring the program within our budget. To do so, we would need this part-time administrative assistant. It handles a lot of the appointments, the paperwork. Kids get pre-tested and post-tested after our presentations. And so there's a lot of organizational type stuff that goes on within this program, and that's what this position would help. It would also help to assist with our existing uh, part-time person in conducting a lot of the stuff that Chief Garner just spoke about, invoice work, other administrative duties. But one of the main things that they deal with, that we deal with, is helping to facilitate the ambulance fund. Each time one of our ambulances transports somebody, that generates paperwork. I pick the paperwork up on a weekly basis, take it back, and our assistant then has to process that paperwork, make copies, send it off to our billing company so that we can ensure that we're getting that funding coming back. Sometimes that can take up a lot of time. Also during the summer months when we're fighting the wildland fires, there's also an additional workload for processing that paperwork. So that's basically a twofold purpose of what this position would accomplish.
And where would you be taking that position payroll from? Or where, it's an existing, I don't see an additional position
It's
authorized.
additional.
Additional, yes.
Oh, it is additional.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's an additional part-time individual.
There's 0 firefighters, but there's 1 part-time
It's in a, if you go
department
back to the page,
secretary,
if
and
you're
that's
back
what
at 40.
you're saying that's what that person will do.
That's what
That's correct.
That's the function that purpose will serve.
Did you want to propose?
I'm just
additional
wondering, would it
costs?
be feasible just to have a full-time staff instead of 2 part-time staff?
That would, this position would allow us to have a administrative assistant there, Monday through Thursday from 8 to 5. It would cover those 4 days. I believe it would be, it's a cheaper cost, I believe, than having a full-time administrative assistant.
The burden, no retirement, no
So
Yeah,
the difference in
the
pay-
benefits for certain.
Yeah, so
Yeah, wouldn't it
for a
just be the
part-timer, just so you
benefits?
understand what we're budgeting for this individual, it's under 1,000 hours. It's going to cost about 14,000. So if you bid in a full-time administrative assistant or something close to that department, if you go back to what PD's doing, they're about 64,000. So there's a big overall
So
change.
PD's admin assistant's costing 64,000. That's not including the 0.3 for the burden. That's just salary.
That's
Or is
salaries
that
across the board.
everything?
Plus benefits.
So that's
Everything.
salary.
That's salaries
plus
and benefits. Mhm.
retirement, all that stuff. City contributes to.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would
64.
point out one other thing. I believe, Chief, you shared with us that you actually have 2 folks that want to be part-time.
Correct. Our administrative assistant now does want to be part-time, yes. And then we would be looking for an additional person. We were hoping that we do have somebody in that position right now who manages the FICE program, being paid through the donation from the healthcare district. That donation goes to the Burn Foundation. This program works in conjunction with the Burn Foundation. We were hoping to be able to just transfer her over to this new position, but it unfortunately doesn't look like that will probably be the case, so we would be looking for an additional part-time person to take that spot.
And your request for the additional firefighter was because the city's shorthanded during the summer and you need, would that person be dedicated to Selma or,
The additional 2 firefighters?
I think you asked for 1 additional
No, I asked
firefighter.
for 2,
Oh,
but
for
I
2.
asked for 1.
Correct. The additional 2 firefighters that we asked for in the operations side would be dedicated to the city, yes. It would be, we were looking to, one of the objectives would have been to increase our minimum staffing from 5 to 6. And in doing so, helps to improve our efficiency on the fire ground and mitigate certain safety factors that we deal with when we only have 5. So that is why we asked for those.
Would they start as entry level, every
Entry
firefighter,
level,
right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, and do you have a full pipeline right now or a list of candidates?
We do have a list of candidates. Our existing list is good until, I believe it was June, is that correct? June or July.
Of this year?
Of this year. Now, we do have experience with some, we've had our internship program and stuff going with the city college where we've brought some some of those fire academy graduates who come in. So it would be, we would probably want to provide another test to give those individuals an opportunity to be established on our list.
Well, I don't see forest fires getting any better anytime soon, and it seems like city sends out more and more firefighters to fight that in the summer. Seems like it would make sense to add an additional additional member of the fire department to the department for this budget.
I hear what you're saying. I wonder if we could just talk about minimum staffing for a moment and what that means. My understanding is when you set a minimum staffing level and you raise it, you are always working and staffing your apparatus to that level. So if somebody calls in sick, you need to still bring in somebody on to make sure you are accommodating that new policy. So we're talking about a policy change?
We would be changing our departmental policy, that's correct. Right now, we have one shift, we have 19 personnel, line staff. One shift was 7, and the other 2 is 6. So we create a minimum staffing right now of 5 to account for someone being off vacation, sick leave,
Right.
something like that. To increase that, to change that policy is why we would need those 2 additional firefighters to put 7 on each shift, and then that would be a policy change.
So it would be a minimum of 1 per station, is that right, to bring it on for the shift? You would need 2? You couldn't really use one additional firefighter?
I'm sorry.
You couldn't really use 1 additional firefighter, it'd have to be 2 or nothing?
I would not say that. We would be able to put one to use at this point. That would increase it. We're already would be looking to increase the minimum staffing on the 1 shift that has 7 now that we're at full staff. We're looking at that right now. An additional firefighter would just enhance a 2nd shift, and then we would make exception for the future.
So it would enhance the shift, it wouldn't provide any greater life safety, would it provide any greater benefits to the citizens in terms of protection by allowing the other fire staff, a little more time off between shifts or something?
It would. Anytime that, I think that's what, anytime we can increase our staffing level will provide a benefit to the community. Just the problem with trying to increase it as we sit now, you look at overtime costs then. So that's why we try to do so. We were trying to do so to increasing it to 7 per shift. That allows us to accommodate for 1 person who is off each day, and therefore increasing to a minimum of 6.
So council's aware too as well, what it costs to fully fund a firefighter. We're just talking about, again, FLSA pay, overtime pay, benefits, insurance, things of that nature. About $91,000 for a step A firefighter.
What's their overtime now?
Their overtime hours at their budget.
Yep.
So for an overtime for this individual, or for a new individual, I should say, is about 75. That's being requested for a brand new firefighter itself. But their FLSA will be about 220 hours.
So the overtime for the year is projected at about how many thousands? How much?
Right now, under operations.
Yeah, it's in the next department. We could talk about the overall
it's on
dollar
the
amount
next
for overtime
department?
proposed. It's in the next department. So right now we're in fire administrations, and we go into fire operations. You'll see the requested overtime budget overall in dollars. Do you want to move into?
Do you want to move?
Is it council? Do you want to move into the next department as a whole?
Moving to the next page and
Yeah,
continue
Are we
the
good?
discussion there?
Right.
So again, moving into the Department 2525, Fire Operations. This is where you will see his line staff, overtime, and things of that nature. Is there any particular items that you'd like to discuss, like overtime? So you can see what Chief is trying to accomplish this year is really consolidate some of these overtime rates into a couple line items. So you'll see for officers in charge an amount. I'm sorry, looking at FLSA 63,000, Salaries overtime about 46,000. That's for the whole department.
So that's a benefit of adding another officer or two officers is reducing the overtime,
Overtime.
just like with PD. The more the officers, the less the
Overtime.
less
That's
the
correct.
overtime.
So the more individuals you add, you do see a reduction in overtime. I mean, there still is overtime overall because of the way the shift structures and callback and events and things of that nature. So you don't completely eliminate it from any department, but there is some small reductions overall. Now, adding multiple individuals is not going to eliminate that overall and compensate for the whole, but you do an assessment overall on what that looks like.
And when you do go to a higher staffing level, which is being discussed, then if you may need to bring people on in order to fill that minimum staffing level. Changing a minimum staffing level is going to mean there might be people you have to call in on overtime if somebody's sick or if somebody's out at training. So we're increasing the staffing level on a daily basis. Just so we're aware. And how that might impact overtime.
Correct. We would be increasing our staffing levels. And to be forthcoming, if we did bring on an additional firefighter and we did increase our minimum staffing, it most likely would not affect this number. This number is in place basically to compensate, even as we sit now, when we drop below our minimum staffing of 5.
Yeah.
So, and it counts for somebody being off and then the inevitable sick call when somebody's on vacation. So, and just to be forthcoming, it would not, most likely, this number, bringing on another person would most likely not affect this number all that much. Or it would not decrease it. Let me say that.
It would increase your FSI.
There would be potential for that line item for our general overtime. It would obviously also increase FLSA overtime as well.
How would that happen if you have an additional person?
The shift matrix and the way the structure works.
Yeah. FLSA kicks in once they reach above 106 hours per pay period. And every pay period we have one shift that exceeds that level, just because of the way our shift structure is of 24 on and 48 off.
Well, I'm all for increasing the safety of the people in Selma, and I'm willing to, move forward and put this in front of the council. But if it's not going to increase the safety, it's not going to decrease the overtime. I'm not hearing you fighting for this. I'm not hearing that this is really that great of an idea, so I'm not going to fight for it. So, I mean, if you're good, sounds like you wanted the 2, but okay, we didn't get it. I don't know if the city has enough for 2 exactly, but maybe 1. But if it's not a huge issue, then we can just move forward, and you can look at it again next year.
Let me say that what I'm trying to do here is, yes, that 1 would be very helpful. 1 would improve the safety of the citizens of this community. I would fight for 1. I believe that, as a staff, we put together a proposal for council that identified your concerns and the concerns of the citizens of the community. If you feel as though increasing fire department staffing would meet within those concerns, this would definitely do that. I don't want you to feel like I'm not fighting for it. I could absolutely, 1 position would absolutely increase the safety overall of the community.
And I do want to echo that the chief has been an advocate for his department and his staff. I myself just use caution when we only have limited resources and trying to address your concerns overall and address the multiple areas that council did some super things in the last budget cycle to support and bring the fire department up to full staffing and to help with recruitment and retention. And the chief is an advocate and has a vision for what's happening in his department in the future. And we've talked about, the future as well. And, maybe 1 year you're able to help more in one area and the next year you help in another area. It's not always everybody gets the same amount, apples to apples, but he has, just so you know, been an advocate for this and also looking at the bigger picture. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you.
And again, he has requested in the original proposal for 2 individuals. He does see that it would be a benefit to his overall department.
Yeah.
So there is some overall increase in safety by adding those positions. So he does see a benefit overall.
I just see more and more firefighters being called out to the forest fires and not having necessarily as many people here, you know, when we have fires in the city of Selma. So there could be a potential shortfall there. But I'm one voice here. Does council want to weigh in on this? Does council want to look for an additional
Well,
1 or 2 firefighters or?
Yeah, right now, Scott, the governor's got a plan, utilizing some resources for because he understands this year is going to be a fire issue. So he's actually, the training has spread out he's now reached out to the military reserve, training them right now to fight fires.
Great.
So he's having he already has an action plan in play.
So
in fact,
you're saying that may fund down the line, that may come in and fund another.
yeah, they'll probably more likely.
Firefighter.
I want to say, because what his plan is to actually train the military with the help of the firefighters training facility to train them to fight fires in the forest and everything in areas where they need it. So utilizing the Army Reserve to train them, that's already a mechanism fund, already in the state of California, emergency fund put away. So he's using that because he understands this year's the rainfall has created a lot of fire hazard,
Yes, sir.
And so
There are a lot of dead trees out there,
yeah,
too.
a lot of dead trees. So they're looking into those things right now. So he's reaching out to all avenues.
Is that
right
yes?
So
Is that
that's-
you want to add a firefighter and maybe they'll get paid for by the state down the line or not?
I'd rather step back and look.
So you don't want to add another firefighter?
I want to look at the governor's plan more, what he's talking about as far as adding a firefighter to our budget and everything. But see, this is something that he's requesting here down the line in our finance. We have to look at our finances if we can absorb this cost, whatever. And right now, we can take it behind closed session and discuss it. What is really, this is just a discussion area right now, so.
We're doing it right now.
I'm doing it right now, but.
Anybody else?
I would
Anybody
like
else?
to consider moving forward with an additional firefighter for you. Because if we're talking about looking in the future, again, I don't want to have a shortfall. And if we get that person, I'm sure we can utilize them to the best of our ability when we are downstaffed or control the overtime. Because these are, again, projections. I mean, but if we have the additional staff and we're not having to call in for overtime and you're controlling, I think it'd be a great investment instead of what happens when we have a shortfall. Then you're pushing all this additional overtime. So
Correct.
I'd like to move forward.
So one proposal that I would request is when you're looking at adding positions, obviously we're not done with the budget as a whole. Look within the positions that you're currently adding and maybe shifting around in that sense. You don't want to get into a budget where you're recognizing growing pains in the future years because you're adding additional bodies too quick. We want to try and build into it. We know in one budget cycle you're not going to get back to the staffing levels that we previously had. You want to kind of grow into it and assess this each year so that we can compensate for where we are, where we're going. Because again, when you look at a forecast, you want to reassess it each year. Things change. There are implementations and state laws and factors that are going to affect your overall budget. As we all know, once you learn something around here, it kind of changes and you got to reassess again. So you really got to do that analysis each year. So if you are looking to, and again, this is just a quest from me and from the finance department, if you are going to look to add additional bodies, propose looking into what you currently have as a proposal and maybe shifting within those numbers. And I can give you what those
that is
positions look
incremental.
like.
I think what Councilperson Guerra is proposing is incremental, though. 1 instead of 2, maybe another one next year. It's council have any input? Mayor Pro Tem? Are you looking to move forward on this or not move forward
Well,
with an additional firefighter?
you know, is it it's a question of money, because we got to be wise with our money. You know, can we go one more year without it? Probably so. I'm really concerned if we want to hire staff. I think we need it more on the higher level. I think we need like an engineer to help our planning department, in-house engineer. So if you're talking about what's my request, that would be my request. But sure, I'm all in favor. Now, if it's a question of money, I'm willing to. I know they're budgeted like the medical insurance. I don't use that. I don't know if I could donate it to a fire position. I'll be more than happy to do it. One now or two next year, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. So I'm happy with either way we go.
Councilman Trujillo, what's your position on this?
So just listening to this, you know, I'm always going to be pro safety and understand, you know, the factors in regards to eliminating staff when they're out in fire. But one of my biggest concerns is that, you know, we're elected, but you're the department head. You sat for the last 2-3 weeks, months, with department heads and our city manager and assistant city manager, and you guys all know that we work with a budget, and we all know we have needs, but our needs are different than what our policy is. And from what I understand you saying, and the city manager and the finance director is stating, that your policy states you need X amount of firefighters to adhere to the safety of our community. And you've accepted and said to us that, you know what, we are adequately staffed, correct? With the people that we hired.
We are at full staff, yes,
We're
with
at full
our,
staff.
with what we have previously been budgeted, those positions.
You're at authorized by the
With-
city
with our-
council. You're at the number authorized by the city
Right,
council,
That's correct, yes.
just like the PD.
So, and that's what, I mean, that's what I'm supposed to understand, that you, the staff, are actually looking and doing the investigative part and seeing how many community members we have, how many homes we have, and what our needs are. So that's what I go by. And if you're telling me that, you know, you are adequately staffed at this present time, and now we're wanting as a council just to say, hey, you know what, I think it would be good. I know you asked for two, but I know it would be good to get or give him one. I have to not only just look at your department, I have to look at everybody else's department. And I have to respect everyone else's department. I know that there's a public works department right now that has 8 to 12 guys. I know that there's a police department that just got 5 people hired. I understand there's a city staff that needs to get more staffing. So I'm not saying that I'm against any hiring, but what I am for is to understanding to, just like I thought, I came in here to discuss it, analyze it, and request for more information so I can make a due diligent answer. And that's my decision.
We're here to make budget decisions.
yeah.
This is pre-budget, so you can request more people.
Yeah,
You
that's
can,
what
what
I'm not
we're
here
here
to
doing.
make an assumption. I'm not here to just because we're gonna go and say, hey, I want another person. I want more I want to analyze it. I want more information from you. I understand they're asking you to fight for we're all gonna fight for persons. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at 5, 6 department heads. And as I look at the department heads, I know that there's a couple running around right now with 10 to 15 less staff members. So when I make and I look at your analyze, I have to analyze everyone else's. And I appreciate all of you guys, and I'm very, very well pleased for all of you. But
So
that's
we
my
have 3?
information.
Okay,
think
so, do we not,
I don't know.
I'd say,
were you a yes or a no?
I was a neutral, but I'm gonna change it to a no after hearing council meeting.
You're a no.
I'm a no.
Jim?
That's it. I'd, Scott, right now,
That's a no?
he did the recommendation. You know, we gotta listen to our people out there.
You don't want to look into this more?
I wanna look into this more, a little more. How, you know, we gotta go back and reassess this thing, and if we can afford it, if not, you know.
So that's a no right now.
That's a no right now,
What should be the number?
Councilman Trujillo?
because of the situation they
Okay.
requested right now.
I'm just asking. Okay, so then it's a no. You don't want to add another firefighter now. Okay,
Okay.
we'll move on then. Thank you. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about budget
Yeah,
numbers
no, no. I
and
mean,
we reauthorized the PD to add 2 officers. So, I mean, we were authorizing potentially the fire department to add an additional officer, and the majority didn't do that.
One.
one part-time person.
Yeah, in the office.
Admin.
Yeah, admin.
Admin in the hospital to offset.
They wouldn't be fighting fires, right?
No.
Okay, thank you.
One more before we move on. Again, you're going to see the operating transfers in, which is the supplement from Measure S. Just want to point that out before we move forward. So seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next page, which is Fire Prevention Department 2550. This is where you'll see the Fire Marshal Department, our employee, which is currently in our budget or in our staffing level now. So it is not an addition to our full-time employees, but you will see that it was changed within the budget year of 18-19. Really what you had before was just an individual doing the overtime to compensate for the inspections and things of that nature. So you do have a full-time fire marshal. There has been some changes on how that revenue structure works, like we discussed earlier. Chief, maybe you can go over what the fire marshal, what you're trying to accomplish with this position, and what the changes that you're moving forward with this fiscal.
Yeah, so what you'll see that the revenue here has moved from what had been in fire administration is now fire prevention, basically because this revenue stream is what the work that the fire marshal does brings this revenue in, and when you look at the company fire inspection, now that work's being done by our engine companies that are out there inspecting each business. The fire marshal oversees that program, provides them with the training, answers any questions that need to be addressed, and kind of facilitates everything that takes place within the prevention department. And those are the functions within his work with creating this revenue here. That position handles anything that has to do with fire investigation, fire prevention work, plans, checks, business inspections related to schools, apartment complexes, healthcare facilities, and just general businesses throughout town.
Okay. Is there any questions regarding this department? No? Okay, we'll move forward.
Planning.
So moving in Department 3100 of the general fund is our planning department. Obviously, we've had during our visioning sessions a lot of discussion on what this department we're trying to accomplish, trying to streamline. We talked about earlier the development process and things of that nature. So you're going to see some. You'll see the planning department manager in this department. You'll see a planning tech, which is already part of our general fund process. Some of the increases you'll see, though, are for the professional services for Department 3100. What we're trying to do is accomplish, again, what we've already started is the housing element. It's a big component of that. We're also looking to assist the planning manager when that individual comes on board to give him some additional support for the planning department itself and helping assess what our zoning looks like and getting some of that, those question marks that we need to be cleaned up. So you're going to see the professional services actually bulked up due to that.
Do you want to? Would council like to break for lunch at this point and come back since we're not really anywhere close to finishing?
How much more longer do you estimate? Not page-wise.
Time-wise, it depends on questions, to be honest. I mean, I can go through it as fast as I can. We have not touched the internal services. We have not touched the enterprise funds. We still have not even gone through the assessment of parks, recreation, and there's also, when we go into Department 9900, I will to have a small presentation on what the allocation to UAL means and how does it impact the overall benefit package.
Everybody good with breaking until 1 o'clock?
Mr. Mayor, with apologies, I have a regular council meeting this evening that I've got to get back to in the city of La Puente, so I wouldn't be able to return when you reconvene. But I think you're okay. I've seen many violations, but I think we're going to be okay.
So we're too many to even count.
Too many to even count, exactly.
What's a
No,
few more?
I think this is fine. Council will continue in its discussion, and I haven't seen
1 o'clock.
any issues.
But
Okay, then with that, we'll adjourn till 1 o'clock. We'll come back.
Recess to 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.